Diplomat Errol Kors found it difficult to concentrate, as the combined voices of dozens of species echoed through the grand circular chamber. The Council's meeting hall had been designed to house representatives from every starfaring civilization in the galaxy, and it often felt as though all of them had chosen this day, of all days, to raise concerns about the confounding behavior of one particular species, humanity. Errol stood near the central podium, every fiber of his being tense with anticipation. It was never easy to stand before the council, but today was especially fraught. He represented Vrila, an ancient but diplomatically progressive civilization that had taken an unprecedented risk, forging an alliance with humans. The council was displeased, to say the least. His four-fingered hands gripped the small translator device at his waist. Across from him, raised on a hovering dais, sat Chancellor Aurelius of the Caliph. The Chancellor's luminous eyes flickered between shades of green and blue, a cultural display that signified rage. Several other counselors, including the wide-browed Ambassador Quellis, observed Errol with suspicion. The distant roars of disagreement coming from the back rows were almost enough to drown out the Chancellor's voice. Chancellor Aurelius's amplified tone rose above the din. Vrila is known throughout the galaxy for its measured diplomacy. We have long respected your ability to mediate conflicts. Yet you, Diplomat Kors, have chosen a bargain with the species known as humans. His eyes dimmed to a cold, unwavering green, and a hush fell throughout the chamber. Do you understand the gravity of what you have done? Errol bowed his head slightly, reminding himself to keep a calm facade. Yes, Chancellor, I do. We, the Vrila, have monitored humans for a considerable time. We believe that their qualities, adaptability, unconventional thinking, may prove invaluable in the conflict against the Rexanth Horde. Ambassador Quellis flared the fins along her jawline, a gesture of exasperation that Errol recognized immediately. Your confederacy is naive. These humans are monsters. They have a documented history of nearly destroying themselves numerous times over. Their approach to resource usage is reckless, and we have records of them testing weapons that obliterated orbital stations and caused irreversible harm to their own moon. The Council finds such behavior indefensible. Voices erupted in unison once again, a cacophony of accusations hurled at Errol. Some ambassadors spat the word savage, others used barbaric. Errol could do little more than wait for the clamor to subside. Only when the commotion dwindled into scattered murmurs did he resume speaking. We do not deny the humans' troubling past, but we have reason to believe that they can harness that same dangerous ingenuity against the Rexanth Horde. That is precisely why the Vrila stand by our decision to form this alliance. The mention of the Rexanth Horde, a hive-minded adversary that had already consumed entire sectors of the galaxy, served to refocus the tension. No one could deny that the Horde posed an existential threat. A century prior, the Council might have mustered the combined militaries of several advanced civilizations and halted the Horde's advance. But old alliances had fractured, fear had taken root, and each species jealously guarded its own secrets. In the meantime, the Rexanth grew stronger. Chancellor Aurelius raised a tendril. We acknowledge the danger of the Horde, he said, but forging a pact with these humans, these so-called resourceful creatures, appears a desperate measure. Ambassador Quellis chimed in, her voice sharp. Desperate measures often create new threats as dire as the original one. Diplomat Kors, you claim to trust the humans. I wonder if the humans deserve that trust. Errol bowed again. I understand your concern, but I promise, in the days to come, you will see precisely why we believe humanity is the key to ending the Horde's campaign of destruction. When the meeting adjourned, it did so under a cloud of uncertain hostility. Many other ambassadors approached Errol to express personal dismay or to fling veiled threats of sanctions if the humans turn out to be the destructive force they feared. Errol simply nodded, repeated that the Vrila had no intention of violating the Council's core principles, and kept his thoughts to himself. Inside, he was anxious. The alliance was fragile, the Council was furious, and the Rexanth horde was pressing ever closer to the heart of civilized space. He stepped from a chamber into the sprawling corridors of the council complex, where artificial skylights mimicked the glow of distant suns. There, waiting for him, was a small group of Vrila officials and aides. One of them, Ambassador Lines, barely concealed her contempt. "You've seen their reaction," she hissed, as the group hurried away from the large double doors. "How can we possibly maintain this alliance under such scrutiny?" He sighed. "We maintain it because we have no choice, unless you have found a better way to stop the horde." She narrowed her eyes, and her gray skin darkened. "Our centuries of diplomacy have never seen a foe like this. I simply question your unshakable faith in these humans." Errol did not have the energy to continue the debate. "I hope to prove that it is not naive faith, but reasoned optimism." With that, he parted ways with Lines and set his path toward the spaceport, where the human delegation would soon arrive. By the time Errol reached the designated arrival terminal, he found an assortment of species milling about in uneasy curiosity. At the far end of the terminal, a sleek, newly arrived ship bore markings that Errol recognized as human, blocky text reading UN. Discovery. Compared to the more fluid designs of other council vessels, the human's craft looked sturdy, pragmatic, perhaps even plain. A single ramp extended from the side, where an honor guard of Vrila security waited. Errol approached, tapping the translator device at his waist to ensure it was functional. It recognized thousands of languages, but human speech patterns often required updated lexicons. He glimpsed movement at the top of the ramp. A row of humans emerged. They were bipedal, clad in crisp uniforms, the insignias of Earth-based nations, now united under a single Terran banner on their shoulders. Leading them was a tall woman with olive skin and steely eyes, whose presence commanded immediate attention. She extended a hand, palm forward in a gesture typical of humans. Admiral Lucia Ortega, representing the United Earth Naval Command. "Diplomat Corps, I presume." Errol clasped her hand briefly, hoping he managed the correct form of a handshake. Even after all his studies, human customs could be bewildering. "Yes, Admiral. Welcome to the Council Complex. I have arranged private quarters for your delegation, if you'll follow me." As they walked, Errol noticed the looks from onlookers, some fearful, some fascinated. Admiral Ortega walked with poised confidence, accompanied by half a dozen other humans, each bearing the posture of individuals used to the chain of command. One of them had a stern countenance and a broad frame. His hair was cropped close, and a faint scar ran along his cheekbone. Errol guessed this was General Garrett Blackwood, the rumored architect of Earth's new weapons research. Within moments, the group had reached a private lounge. Glass walls provided a panoramic view of the starport, where ships of all shapes came and went. Overhead, large vessels from the Caliph or the Cetri soared gracefully. The humans walked in, scanning the surroundings with quiet interest. Admiral Ortega exhaled, her posture relaxing slightly. "It's my first time here, but the architecture is certainly breathtaking. I appreciate the welcome, Diplomat. I only hope it won't be the last time we're allowed in the Council's central hub." Errol cast a wary glance at her. "I assume you're aware that many Council members are less than thrilled about your arrival." General Blackwood folded his muscular arms. "They'd be fools not to keep an eye on us. Our history doesn't paint us in the best light." Admiral Ortega shrugged. "We can't change the past, but we can change how we work together now. We're not here to make enemies. We're here because the Horde is advancing faster than any single power can handle." Errol nodded. "Precisely. Some of my own colleagues doubt the wisdom of this alliance, especially after seeing the damage your people nearly inflicted upon yourselves in your earlier centuries. But I've seen enough of your strategic reports and your capacity to adapt to believe you hold a certain, unpredictable advantage." Ortega's lips curved into a faint smile. "Unpredictable is a word we've heard often. In this galaxy, it might be a blessing and a curse. Perhaps the Council sees it as more curse than blessing." General Blackwood laughed quietly, and the sound carried an edge of confidence that seemed to hover near arrogance. By the time we're finished, they'll have to acknowledge that we can do more than wage war. We can also end it. Errol glanced around the lounge. Though he admired humanity's boldness, he could sense the trepidation among his own aides standing in the corners. The humans exuded an air of control, even though they were significantly outnumbered. "We have much to discuss," he said. "The council is scheduled to reconvene in 3 days. Until then, your delegation will have to adhere to several restrictions. No weapons testing, no unauthorized flights in protected space, and limited access to the council's archives." Blackwood's brows tightened. "We understand, but I assume our research teams will be allowed some manner of scientific collaboration with Vryla's experts." Errol hesitated. "Within reason, yes, but it would be unwise to provoke the other council members' right." "Now," Ortega nodded, "rest assured, we'll be on our best behavior." In the following days, Errol found himself juggling a dizzying array of duties. He escorted the human delegation to a series of carefully moderated meetings with the Vryla leadership. Admiral Ortega presented details of an emerging concept, a psionic disruption system they had devised to counter the hive mind connectivity of the Rexanth Horde. It was the technology that first piqued the Vryla's interest and one of the reasons they had agreed to this alliance. However, implementing the plan required a great deal of precise data about faster-than-light travel corridors and about the frequencies certain species used in telepathy. These pieces of information were normally guarded under strict council protocols. The debate in the Vryla boardroom turned fierce. Ambassador Lines, who had long harbored doubts, confronted Ortega with a pointed question. "Our species spent centuries fostering trust within the council. Now you arrive with talk of sending out a disruption wave that, if miscalculated, could spill over into telepathic species who rely on those frequencies for daily communication. Are you prepared to shoulder that responsibility?" Ortega did not flinch. "We won't proceed without ensuring no friendly species is harmed. Our system is targeted specifically at the neural patterns that form the Rexanth link. We have already tested a less powerful version on Earth, using artificially generated hive-like networks, to confirm it affects only a very narrow band of psionic activity." Lines was not satisfied. "Your own planet, from what I hear, has been nearly destroyed multiple times through ill-fated tests. You'll understand if we doubt your ability to avoid catastrophic accidents." Errol sensed the mounting tensions. Ortega's posture remained calm. "Yes, we have a history of catastrophic mistakes, but we also have a history of learning from those mistakes. We do not intend to risk innocent lives to perfect the disruption wave." Lines seemed about to argue further when Errol interjected. "Let us not forget the alternative. The Horde has annihilated entire planets. If the Council continues with standard protocols, diplomatic envoys, and the occasional fleet action, within a decade, the Rexanth will be unstoppable. If there is a way to sever their hive link, or even momentarily destabilize it, that could be the turning point." An uneasy hush filled the boardroom. The Vryla leadership exchanged glances, privately weighing the enormous gamble. Finally, Ambassador Line sighed. "The final decision still rests with the council at large, but if you can present proof that your method can be tested safely, I will not stand in its way." Ortega inclined her head slightly in thanks. "We will present our data. Your skepticism is understandable, Ambassador." Once the humans had departed, Lines approached Errol. "I don't like this," she muttered. "I don't like these humans, their arrogance, their unpredictability. But perhaps it is exactly that unpredictability that might give us a chance. Regardless, don't trust them too much." Errol gave a small, weary smile. "I will keep my eyes open. But if you'd seen what I've seen in their demonstrations, you might be more willing to believe." The next day, a muted pall fell over the entire council complex as news spread. The Rexanth Horde had launched an offensive on a distant frontier station controlled by the Elysians. The images that reached the council were harrowing. Organic warships, shaped like gargantuan insects, had descended upon the station, overwhelming its defenses in hours. Entire families of Elysians were either captured for assimilation or simply devoured. The final transmissions ended in static, leaving every council member speechless. A swift emergency session was convened. Representatives from the Elysians demanded immediate aid and retribution. Others claimed that any escalation risked drawing the Horde deeper into populated territory. Errol stood silently, feeling the entire weight of the moment settle onto his shoulders. On the dais, Chancellor Aurelius hesitated, glancing around at the fractious gathering. Then the attention shifted to Errol and, by extension, the humans. One representative asked, "Where is this so-called disruptive weapon now? Can it be deployed to the Elysian station?" Before Errol could answer, Ambassador Quellis interrupted. "We don't even know if it works. We can't risk unleashing an untested technology. If it backfires, it may only strengthen the hive mind or harm telepathic species among us." Chancellor Aurelius nodded grimly. "Diplomat Corps, you assured us the humans had solutions, but we find ourselves with more questions than ever." Errol cleared his throat, stepping forward. "The technology is close to operational, but Earth's military command requires a specific environment to finalize the tests. They have asked for permission to conduct these tests near the Gamma Rift, an uninhabited region that can safely absorb the energy surges. We only request that the Council observe from a distance. If the demonstration succeeds, we will have the means to repel the Horde, or aggravate it." Quellis snapped. "Diplomat Corps, I do not relish the thought of the Horde turning its focus upon us prematurely." Aurelius turned to the assembly, luminous eyes flickering. "Nonetheless, we are short on options. Let the humans conduct their demonstration. We will withhold official council endorsement until after we see the results." That was the closest thing to an agreement anyone could have hoped for. Within hours, messages were dispatched. The humans' command ships aligned with Vrila escorts to move into position at the Gamma Rift. Technicians throughout the council complex whispered about the dangerous, unapproved power levels rumored to be involved. Several ambassadors prepared to document every detail, quietly hoping that if things went wrong, they would have enough evidence to prove the humans' recklessness once and for all. Errol found himself on a Vrila cruiser heading toward the Gamma Rift, anxious and uncertain. The journey took several days. During that time, tension built like an electric charge. He spent most of the voyage conferring with Admiral Ortega and General Blackwood. Ortega looked composed, but Errol could sense the pressure she bore. If her plan failed, the Council would likely condemn Earth. The Vrila, by extension, would also face sanctions or worse. When the fleet reached the fringes of the rift, the humans immediately set up their testing protocols. The region was a swirl of cosmic dust and gravitational anomalies. The swirling clouds of purple and silver made for a beautiful but treacherous backdrop. A handful of other Council vessels arrived, including an observation ship commanded by the Chancellor himself. Errol stood on the command deck of the flagship UN. Intrepid, transparent observation windows displayed the swirling masses of ionized gas. Admiral Ortega stood at his side, methodically checking readouts. All around them, human officers spoke in hushed, disciplined tones, calibrating scanning arrays and energy projectors. General Blackwood, wearing his typical stoic expression, was down in the weapons bay overseeing the final preparations. Ortega ran a hand through her dark hair. "We'll start small," she explained. "An artificial energy surge to replicate the neural signals of the Rexanth. Then we'll flood the area with our disruption wave. If the readings match our expectations, we can scale it up." Errol nodded. "And if they don't match?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Then we recalibrate. Or, if it fails spectacularly, we face the Council's wrath. Let's hope it doesn't come to that." A signal from the observation vessel crackled in over the comm. "Chancellor Aurelius is in position. You may proceed." Ortega's jaw set with determination. "Begin Phase 1. A large disc-shaped probe launched from the Intrepid, drifting out into the vacuum. Within minutes, it triggered an expansive burst of energy. Through the windows, Errol saw a circular wave ripple outward, illuminating the drifting clouds in bright blues and whites. Sensors beeped in excitement as the phenomenon expanded, sending arcs of light across the area. On the readouts, patterns formed that were reminiscent of the neural frequencies used by the Horde Hive ships. A murmur went through the human personnel. So far, so good. Then came the real test. General Blackwood's voice sounded over the speakers. Activating disruption wave in 3, 2. A colossal beam of shimmering light erupted from the Intrepid's underbelly. It swept outward in a spiral, colliding with the artificially generated signals. Instantly, swirling eddies of interference glowed like miniature storms. For a moment, it seemed stable. Then the entire region lit up as though a newborn star had ignited. Errol shielded his eyes. Alarm klaxons blared. Ortega shouted for status reports. Officers scrambled, trying to maintain power balance. Outside, a bright orb of energy flared, dwarfing the probe that had created it. It was both beautiful and terrifying. When the lights subsided, the readouts flickered uncertainly. Over the next minute, data poured in. The disruption wave had indeed canceled the simulated hive signals, more thoroughly than predicted, in fact. But it had also caused pockets of energy to spike uncontrollably, reminiscent of an actual star's corona. A panicked voice erupted from the Council's observation vessel. "You've created a solar-type reaction. Our instruments are blinded in multiple wavelengths. We lost comms with 2 neighboring sectors." Ortega looked stern. "Shut down the wave generator immediately," she commanded. Power levels gradually receded. Within seconds, the bright orb was already dissipating, but the damage had been done. 2 Council ships had been forced to back away to avoid being bathed in dangerous radiation. Tempers would undoubtedly flare once everyone regained normal communications. General Blackwood arrived on the bridge, face dark. The effect was stronger than we anticipated. But if the Rexanth had been here, they'd have fled in confusion, maybe even fear. "That's little comfort to the Council," Errol remarked grimly, "when we've just proven their worst fear, that we can easily create a star-like reaction without fully controlling it." Ortega sighed. "We'll have to deliver a thorough explanation. Still, the principle stands. The wave works. With more precise calibration, we could destabilize the Horde's neural link." Sure enough, an angry message from Chancellor Aurelius arrived within hours. The demonstration was labeled reckless and borderline catastrophic. Yet there was also a note of begrudging awe in the Chancellor's tone. The combined Vrila-human team had indeed managed something no other civilization had, an actual disruption wave that mimicked the intensity of a living hive mind and then shattered it. In the middle of drafting an official response, Errol received urgent word. A group of Rexanth scouts had been detected at the edge of the Gamma Rift, likely drawn by the intense energy spike. The Council's concerns were about to be overshadowed by the potential arrival of the very threat they feared. Alarms echoed throughout the Intrepid as the bridge crew scrambled to view the real-time sensor data. Admiral Ortega paced, one hand on her sidearm, an unnecessary reflex in the vacuum of space, but telling of her mindset. "We count 6 organic scout vessels," reported a lieutenant. "Their configuration matches known Rexanth patterns. They're holding at the system boundary." Errol clenched his jaw. "They must be analyzing the energy we just unleashed. Maybe they're trying to see if it's a weapon aimed at them." Blackwood let out a short, humorless laugh. "It is a weapon aimed at them. Question is, do we engage now, or do we hold?" Ortega stared at the star map glowing on the main console. "We can't afford a direct confrontation yet. Our wave is not fully stable. If they send back detailed intel, the Horde might adapt. We only have one chance to surprise them." A heated debate followed. Some demanded an immediate strike, cripple the scouts before they could report. Others pointed out that the rest of the Council would never forgive an unprovoked preemptive attack on the outskirts of a recognized neutral zone. Errol argued that if the humans attacked now, they would confirm every fear swirling around them. Admiral Ortega finally made a call. "We'll maintain our position. Let them observe. If they move in aggressively, we respond. Meanwhile, we need to refine the wave's calibration so we don't accidentally create another miniature sun. Several tense hours passed. The Rexanth scouts lingered at the edge of the system, never crossing a certain threshold. Their bioships emitted sporadic pulses of greenish light, as if testing the environment. Then abruptly, they withdrew. The chain of events left the entire fleet uneasy. The Horde did not typically retreat. It either attacked or ignored. That it seemed to be hesitant was an anomaly. Within a day, the Council met again in emergency session via holographic links because returning from the Gamma Rift would take too much time. Chancellor Aurelius appeared on a projection in the Intrepid's war room, eyes more subdued in color than usual. Diplomat Corps, Admiral Ortega, the entire Council demands answers. You put on a show of power that nearly caused catastrophic side effects. Now the Rexanth appear uncertain. Some see this as a success. Others fear a new reason to distrust your alliance. Explain yourselves. Ortega stood before the projector, posture erect. Chancellor, the demonstration's effect went beyond our ideal parameters, but it shows the central premise is sound. We can interfere with the Hive link. The mere possibility is enough to give the Rexanth pause. Aurelius let out a low hum. And you risk everything on that assumption? The Council is not pleased. Errol interjected. Yet for the first time, we've seen Rexanth scouts draw back. Whether by fear or confusion, they decided not to engage. We must treat that as a critical development. A pause followed. Then Aurelius spoke slowly. The Council will not condone further reckless demonstrations. But we cannot deny this is a significant achievement. We demand you refine your technology and share it with us for careful oversight. Admiral Ortega shook her head. Respectfully, Chancellor, we must keep certain aspects classified. If every detail is widely disseminated, the odds of a leak increase. The Horde might learn our exact methods. Our advantage lies in secrecy. Chancellor Aurelius's eyes flashed with indignation, but he muttered, very well. You will, however, keep us informed. Should you attempt another test without clearance, we will consider it an act of aggression. When the transmission ended, the war room erupted in debates. Errol felt dizzy from the clashing arguments. General Blackwood wanted more freedom to perfect the disruption wave. Some of the Vrila scientists supported him, intrigued by the raw potential. Ambassador Lines, who had joined via HoloLink, pointedly criticized the Alliance's repeated disregard for Council protocols. I told you, Lines said, her holographic form shimmering with frustration. This partnership is hanging by a thread. The Council is ready to label humans as a threat if we overstep again. Errol closed his eyes. We still have the same problem. The Rexanth Horde. If we don't act decisively, they'll overrun more frontier stations. The only difference is that now they know we have a potential tool against them that might force them into a more aggressive move sooner. In the midst of this swirling tension, word came that the Rexanth had attacked yet another outlying colony. This time, the defenders had managed to transmit partial data on the Horde's approach. Disturbingly, it looked as though the Rexanth were altering their swarm formation, possibly adapting new tactics. Time was running out. Days later, a coded message reached Admiral Ortega from a human outpost near the border. A large Rexanth fleet was congregating in a region called the Delta Verge. Intelligence suggested they were preparing a massive incursion. If so, they might slice directly through Council space within weeks. The news prompted Ortega to propose a desperate measure, establishing direct contact with the Horde. She believed that with the threat of the disruption wave looming, the Horde might at least consider a form of negotiation. The idea was met with widespread disbelief and outright scorn from some. The Horde did not negotiate, it conquered. Yet Dr. Lien, a human xenopsychologist who had been quietly studying partial scans of the hive mind's communications, proposed that the disruption had introduced something new into the equation: dissent. The hive had begun exhibiting faint internal disagreements, at least if the neural pulses measured near the Gamma Rift were any indication. General Blackwood disliked the notion of parley. They've devoured countless worlds. They don't know the meaning of diplomacy. Dr. Lien kept her voice measured. They've never needed to, but we've shown we can disrupt them. Now the entire hive might be factoring in the cost of continuing aggression against a species that can fracture their consciousness. Errol found himself strangely hopeful. So perhaps they could be convinced that the path of conquest is too expensive? Ortega nodded. We can offer them a demilitarized zone, no expansion, in exchange for partial access to certain theoretical data in the Council archives. Supposedly, the Horde is searching for a path to a higher evolutionary state. If they think the data in those archives can help them achieve that, they might pause. Blackwood snorted. Or if they'll see it as an invitation to slip past our defenses once they think they've learned enough. Despite skepticism, Ortega pushed forward. She prepared a single message to broadcast on frequencies the Horde might detect, an invitation for a direct meeting at a neutral location. A tense hush fell as the message was sent. Days passed with no reply. Then, unbelievably, the Horde responded. Their pulses indicated something akin to acceptance. Suddenly, the entire galaxy lurched into a new era of possibility or doom. No one could say which. The arranged meeting place was a hollowed asteroid in a neutral sector known as the Inera Belt. Several council delegates insisted on accompanying the humans and Vryla, hoping to serve as witnesses. Security precautions were extensive. The asteroid was rigged with advanced scanning equipment to detect any sign of treachery. The question on everyone's mind was, how does one negotiate with a collective that speaks in bioluminescent patterns and shared telepathic waves? When the day came, the tension was stifling. A massive organic vessel, shaped like a spined caterpillar, emerged from slipspace and docked near the asteroid. The council party, including Errol, Ortega, Blackwood, and half a dozen ambassadors from other species, waited inside a pressurized chamber. They wore breathing apparatuses suitable for the environment, since the Horde typically filled their ships with ammonia-based atmospheres. Some mechanical devices had been set up to interpret the pulses that the Rexanth used to communicate. 2 towering drones, each about 7 feet tall, with segmented limbs and wide, dark eyes, entered the chamber. They moved with fluid precision, their exoskeletons gleaming under the overhead lights. Along their ridges, patterns of green and violet pulsed in mesmerizing rhythms. A hush fell over the assembly. It was the closest any of them had come to a living Rexanth, not in the midst of battle. Ortega stepped forward, voice firm. We greet you on behalf of the United Earth Naval Command and the Vryla Confederacy. We request a cessation of hostilities so that we may discuss terms. At first, there was only a series of pulses across the drone's exoskeletons. Then a translator device beeped, and a garbled approximation of speech emerged. You disrupt unity. Why? Dr. Lien, carefully monitoring the translation console, spoke softly. They're referencing the interference we caused. They want to know why we have attacked their unity. Errol inhaled, stepping up next to Ortega. We did not intend aggression, but we will defend ourselves. We are prepared to share knowledge of dimensional mathematics that could further your evolution. We only ask that you cease your expansion. A wave of green pulses flickered across the drones, and the translator spat out, we expand or stagnate. Expansion is essential. General Blackwood stared at them warily. Here's the crux. We can show them that knowledge itself is a form of expansion. They don't have to physically consume new civilizations to grow if they can glean what they seek from other means. The translator responded slowly as the drones pulsed. Consumption is efficiency. Your wave breaks the mind. It is torment. A ripple of unease passed through the ambassadors. Even Ortega's stern features wavered. Breaking the hive link was indeed cruel from the perspective of a species that knew only collective unity. Errol attempted a more conciliatory approach. We do not wish to break your mind, but we will if you continue to devour innocent worlds. This is your chance to spare yourself that torment. Silence, except for the soft hum of the life support systems. Then came another series of pulses. The translator's voice rasped. Knowledge in exchange for truce. Eyes darted around the chamber. Could it really be that simple? Ortega nodded slowly. A demilitarized border. No more invasions. No more assimilation. We provide partial data on dimensional evolution. If you honor the terms, we won't use our disruptive weapon. The drones flickered again, seemingly communicating not only with each other, but perhaps with the entire distant hive. After a nerve-wracking pause, the translator beeped out, "Agree," or face fracturing. "We choose knowledge." In that moment, it felt as though the entire galaxy held its breath. The monstrous devourers of civilizations had just, in their own stilted way, agreed to a form of negotiation, all because they now knew that facing these so-called naive humans and their allies risked something worse than physical defeat: the dissolution of their collective mind. The meeting ended as abruptly as it started. The drones withdrew, and soon their bioship melted back into slip space. No official treaty had been signed, but the exchange of data was understood. The humans in Vryla would transmit theoretical frameworks on multidimensional physics, while the Horde ships would stop their conquests and remain within the designated territory. Whether this arrangement would last was a question no one could answer confidently. When news broke across Council space, astonishment prevailed. Some species denounced the arrangement, claiming it was madness to give the Horde any more knowledge. Others, especially those whose worlds were under imminent threat, hailed it as the first real hope in generations. Conferences erupted, arguments raged, but the key fact remained. The Horde had retreated from several contested border systems, halting their expansions for the first time in recorded history. Chancellor Aurelius convened a final meeting at the Council complex to address the aftermath. Errol, Ortega, Blackwood, and Dr. Lien stood in the center of the great chamber, dwarfed by the ring of ambassadors and representatives above them. Aurelius spoke in a voice that trembled between relief and outrage. "We cannot deny that the Horde's advance has stalled, nor can we deny that our new alliance has acted without the Council's full approval. You have, effectively, forced our hand." Errol kept his composure. "Chancellor, with respect, it was only because of that pressure that the Horde agreed to talk at all. Had we followed normal protocols, the Horde would be rampaging through the Elysian systems by now." Ambassador Quellus's fins flared. "We stand on the brink of a new era. Either the Horde will abide by this arrangement, or we have only delayed a more devastating war. And we have handed them pieces of our precious archive data. What happens if they use it to become even more dangerous?" Admiral Ortega met Quellus's gaze. "If they break the truce, we use the disruption wave to fracture them permanently. That risk remains on the table. As for the knowledge, it's theoretical. Many of our scientists believe they'll have to do extensive research of their own to make use of it, which should keep them occupied. It's a gamble, yes, but everything about the Horde is a gamble." "The chamber murmured, delegates exchanging uncertain looks. Then Aurelius, eyes flickering to a softer blue, addressed the group. "In the centuries we have struggled against the Horde, never once have they ceased their advance. Now they have. I remain wary, but I must acknowledge that, for the moment, we have a chance to catch our breath. Our alliance with humanity has proved far from a simple matter. They are dangerous, perhaps monstrous in certain respects, but they have done something no one else could do: force the Horde to consider another path." In the following hours, the Council debated how to oversee the new arrangement, who would monitor the demilitarized zone, and whether to hold the humans more accountable for any future disruptive tests. Through it all, Errol sensed a profound shift. The condemnation was tempered by a grudging respect. Some ambassadors, especially those from threatened species, approached Admiral Ortega privately to thank her for delivering them from the brink of annihilation. Others cast sour looks, as though unimpressed that Earth had effectively become a pivot point for the entire galaxy. Late that evening, once the discussions had concluded, Errol walked alongside Ortega in one of the complex's quiet corridors. Holographic banners shimmered along the walls, depicting scenes of unity from bygone eras. He asked softly, "Do you truly believe this will hold? That the Horde can be persuaded to confine itself to its own space, all for the sake of advanced theories?" Ortega stared at a banner, showing a young star rising over the horizon of an alien world. I think we bought time. The Horde now knows we can hurt them in a way they never imagined. Maybe, in that time, they'll find the knowledge they're looking for and evolve into something less predatory. Or maybe they'll try to twist it to strengthen themselves. If they do, we'll be ready with the wave. Errol studied her face. There was a weariness there he had not seen before. And what of the council calling humans naive? He ventured. I suppose they'll have to find a new insult. She chuckled softly. Sometimes being called naive just means you try the impossible. Maybe that's been humanity's story all along, trying what everyone else deemed impossible, and sometimes succeeding. They strolled in silence for a few moments, the ambient hum of the complex's air cycling around them. A cluster of Vrila delegates hurried past, offering half-bows in greeting, their demeanor far less cold than it had been weeks ago. A sign of shifting attitudes, perhaps. As they reached a window that overlooked the starport, Errol felt a flutter of renewed hope. Dozens of ships from countless species crisscrossed in that labyrinth of docking bays and departure corridors. It was a reminder that the galaxy was vast, diverse, and often on the edge of chaos. Yet the presence of the humans, so recently reviled, had sparked the first real slowdown in the Horde's expansions. Nothing was guaranteed, but the possibility of survival was suddenly more tangible. Ortega turned to him. You once told the council that the Vrila saw something special in humans, that you believed we could adapt where others couldn't. Do you still believe that? He managed a small laugh. Now more than ever. Your capacity for both destruction and unexpected mercy is astounding. You can be monstrous, yes, but also surprisingly benevolent. That duality may be what the galaxy needed. A civilization that, once it sets its mind on a goal, will chase it beyond all reason, whether that goal is waging war or negotiating for peace. She tilted her head, a thoughtful expression flickering across her features. I'm glad it's gone this way then. We're aware of the suspicion we've caused, but humanity's not done surprising people. The question is whether we'll surprise them for better or for worse. Behind them, General Blackwood and Dr. Lien approached. Blackwood's stride was confident as ever, but Dr. Lien's eyes were reddened from fatigue. They had been debriefing with numerous scientists about sharing partial data from Earth's archives to the Horde. The moral implications were staggering, handing over advanced theoretical frameworks to the galaxy's most feared predator. Yet it might very well be the difference between continued survival and the total consumption of every living world. Blackwood nodded curtly at Errol. We're heading back to the Intrepid soon. The Council is assigning observers to ensure we're not handing out superweapons disguised as theoretical data. And I can't say I blame them. Dr. Lien rubbed her temples. We'll keep everything strictly controlled. We're only releasing a curated set of ideas. Nothing that would instantly give them the capacity to tear a hole in the fabric of space. She paused, then smiled wryly. Of course, we've done that ourselves once or twice by accident. Ortega gave her a mock scowl. You're not supposed to mention that in front of the Vrila. Doctor. Errol, feeling the trace of grin, said, Don't worry. I've heard rumors of your accidents already. You do know how to keep the council on edge. They made their way down a corridor lined with a mosaic depicting various historical treaties. It was an elegant reminder of countless alliances that had shaped galactic history. As they passed, Errol allowed himself a moment of reflection. The council had always presumed that it was wise, that it knew the boundaries of what should and should not be done in diplomacy. Then the naive humans arrived, ignoring those boundaries, forging a path no one else dared. Had the council been right to fear them? Perhaps. Had the Vrila been right to ally with them? Errol believed so. Even a monstrous ally could be the key to defeating an even greater horror. And in the process, perhaps those monsters could find redemption, if not for themselves, then for the entire galaxy. He recalled the parting words of Ambassador Quellis after the meeting. You have no idea what kind of monsters you bargained with. To which Errol had silently replied, That's precisely why we did it. Because the worst monster of all would be the Horde, unchecked. Outside the windows, bright engine flares from a departing human craft lit up the docking bay. A group of onlookers watched the vessel ascend, no doubt forming their own opinions about these strange Earthlings who had arrived like reckless newcomers. In the days to come, there would be endless committees, supervised data transfers, possible sparks of conflict. Some members of the council would continuously question the wisdom of trusting humans. Others would see them as the galaxy's best hope. The short-term outcome was clear enough. The Horde had pulled back its forward fleets, and they were reeling from the new fear of having their hive link shattered. Meanwhile, on Earth and Vrila, scientists would collaborate on ways to refine and control the wave technology, ensuring it could be used effectively if the Horde resumed hostilities. It was a precarious peace, a shared standoff built on the threat of devastating psychic damage to an entire civilization. Errol accompanied the human delegation back to their docking bay, where final checks were being made before they returned to the Intrepid. Admiral Ortega and General Blackwood offered their thanks. It was an odd spectacle. Two humans, so physically small in the grand tapestry of galactic species, yet overshadowing the station's corridors with their presence alone. They looked exhausted, each bearing the invisible weight of being the ambassadors of their entire planet. Ortega paused on the threshold. "Diplomat Corps," she said quietly, "we owe you. You took a great risk in standing by us, even when your own peers thought it madness. We won't forget that." Errol's gaze lingered on her face, then moved to the corridor behind her, where curious faces peeked from behind corners. "We won't forget that you were willing to do what no one else dared. The Council called you naive, but your brand of naive might have saved us all." She extended her hand, that universal gesture of camaraderie. He accepted, though his own alien physiology made the handshake somewhat clumsy. It felt like a promise, a sign that for all the condemnation, all the fear, a new alliance had taken shape, one that might tip the scales of fate. The human delegation disappeared into their ship, and the hatch sealed behind them. Errol stepped back, watching as the docking clamps released and the craft lifted away. He sensed a swirl of conflicting emotions: relief, hope, dread, curiosity about what further monstrosities humankind might reveal if pushed. In time, he had no doubt that the rest of the galaxy would discover that, yes, these humans could be monsters, but they could also be visionaries. And in a universe threatened by a hive of relentless devourers, that combination might be precisely what was needed. As the ship vanished into the star-studded darkness, Errol Corrs reflected on everything that had transpired. A year ago, forging an alliance with Earth would have been unthinkable. Yet, here he was, instrumental in ensuring that alliance not only existed, but potentially held the key to galactic salvation. Whether it would unravel in violence or blossom into a new era of peace was unknowable. But for now, the Horde had been stopped. And for now, the Council, though still tense, had ceded that perhaps trusting these unpredictable newcomers wasn't the reckless folly they once believed. Errol left the docking bay and returned to the corridor that led to the Council's grand chamber. His shoulders felt heavy, as though the entire galaxy pressed upon them. And yet, there was a buoyancy in his steps, a sense that, for the first time in centuries, a genuine crack of light had appeared in the darkness of the Rexanth threat. All thanks to the species that everyone had labeled naive, until they discovered the true monsters the Vrila were, willing to bargain with. A sliver of moonlight glimmered across the quiet hallway of the International Medical Center in London. Dr. Irene Pearson, head of the War Trauma Ward, was finishing her evening rounds. Her patients were stable, most of them still awake with the typical insomnia that came from prolonged conflict in faraway colonies. As she walked past a tall window overlooking the city, she paused, gazing at the star-laden night. The world felt momentarily at peace. Yet something in her gut stirred. She'd spent enough time patching up soldiers to sense when danger was brewing. Down at the secure hangar bay connected to the hospital's emergency wing, Captain Mariana Hayes stepped off a transport shuttle. Though wearing standard fatigues, she carried an insignia on her shoulder that set her apart: the symbol of the Angel Corps. It was a stylized caduceus overlapping a winged shield, representing a unit that melded medical expertise and combat readiness. She had only recently returned to Earth from a humanitarian mission on a distant mining colony. There, she and her team had spent months providing emergency care to settlers plagued by radiation sickness, and had fended off marauders who preyed on vulnerable outposts. Yet that mission, for all its intensity, had given her little preparation for the warnings Earth's Defense Command had just issued. Security logs across the solar system indicated that several unidentified vessels had appeared along the edge of Earth's outer perimeter. They hadn't communicated or answered any hails. They simply lingered near the corridors of space traffic close to Mars. The question was whether they posed any threat. Official channels were quiet. Rumors spread that the ships might be rogue traders, scavengers, or possibly something more sinister. The galaxy's political climate was complicated, and humans were still considered newcomers in interstellar affairs. Despite joining a broad-based council of species, Earth had not forged close alliances. They relied largely on their own forces and the partial recognition that came with membership in the Galactic Council. Mariana handed over her ID to a young officer at the hospital's security desk. He scanned it with awkward precision and gave her a polite nod. She offered a small smile in return, noticing how his hand trembled slightly. Then again, the tension that had flared across global media in the last 2 days was enough to rattle even the bravest souls. Words like possible invasion and unverified alien threat were being tossed around. Images had circulated of ominous shapes in the darkness beyond Mars. Earth's military, and particularly the Angel Corps, had begun quiet preparations for a worst-case scenario. Yet no one wanted to declare an emergency without real evidence. Mariana climbed the stairs, preferring the physical exertion to the elevator. She had spent her career bridging 2 worlds, the battlefield and the hospital ward. The Angel Corps existed explicitly for this purpose, to protect medical personnel and facilities in conflict zones and to fight when necessary with the advantage of deep medical knowledge. To some, that blend was unnatural. How could healers also be warriors? But for Mariana, it was the only rational approach. She had seen enough horrors to know that protecting those who saved lives sometimes required the ability to take lives as well. She found Dr. Irene Pearson standing at the nurse's station on the 10th floor. The 2 old friends exchanged a warm embrace. Irene's eyes lit with relief at Mariana's presence. Though she teased, "I've got half a mind to scold you for coming back without sending me a message first. Then again, I suppose a top-secret recall for the Angel Corps outranks courtesy visits." Mariana shrugged, setting down her duffel bag. "I was rushed from the colony the moment HQ picked up suspicious signals near Mars. Now that we're on alert, they've recalled all Angel Corps teams for immediate readiness. I have the feeling something's about to happen." Irene nodded, leading her to a private corner. "Y sensate tu. I can't explain why, but the air is different. Our staff has been seeing unusual bulletins, something about unauthorized scans of major hospitals around the globe. Command says it might be data mining by criminals, but nobody's sure." Mariana pressed her lips together. Hospitals were protected under every known interstellar treaty. Even the most brutal empires tended to respect medical neutrality, if only to preserve it for themselves. Who would be stupid enough or cruel enough to target healing centers? She asked, her tone half rhetorical. Irene's expression darkened. "I don't know, but I heard rumors that the ships near Mars are broadcasting on odd frequencies, possibly encrypting. Some experts think they're from the Krail Empire." The Krail. The name alone made Mariana's stomach tighten. They were an expansionist power beyond Earth's region of space. Fierce, uncompromising, rumored to have conquered multiple worlds without mercy. Most believed they adhered to no code but their own. The thought of them approaching Earth, especially with an interest in hospital data, sent a chill through her. Yet there was no open evidence, only speculation. Tired from her journey, Mariana decided to remain at the hospital, anticipating that a formal briefing with Earth Defense Command might come in the morning. She spent the evening assisting Irene with patient checkups, slipping comfortably into her role as a medic. A soldier might have complained of boredom, But Mariana took solace in caring for those in need. She felt at home among the beep of life support machines and the smell of antiseptics. She also found comfort in Irene's unwavering dedication, a reminder of why healers were worth defending at all costs. It was just past midnight when the emergency broadcast interrupted the hospital's public address system. A static-laced voice demanded immediate attention from all personnel. Something had happened at the small medical outpost on the lunar surface. Reports of explosions and energy discharge, followed by frantic pleas for help. The final transmission cut off mid-scream, leaving everyone in an uneasy hush. Mariana and Irene stood together among a cluster of wide-eyed doctors and nurses around the comm station. There were no further signals from the lunar facility. Earth defense satellites caught glimpses of strange vessels departing the moon at high speed, heading into darkness. A wave of dread descended upon the staff. The dreaded question hung in the air: who attacks an unarmed medical base? The answer, Mariana suspected, was exactly who Irene feared. Within minutes, she received new orders. Angel Corps mobilization was authorized. Another base, this time a large research hospital near the Arctic, had reported a data breach identical to what had been glimpsed at the moon station, as if a distant intelligence was systematically investigating medical centers. The press demanded answers, but the only certainty was that an unidentified force had just violated the ultimate taboo, harming healers. As news spread worldwide, tension erupted. Governments declared states of emergency, though many were reluctant to call it outright invasion. Rumor mills spun wild theories, but a chilling consensus grew among Earth's leaders that whatever threatened them, it clearly had no respect for the rules of war. People's fury rose. Soldiers, civilians, and especially doctors seethed at the idea that someone would strike those dedicated to preserving life. Mariana's Angel Corps unit, along with multiple allied teams, braced themselves for what was coming. Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away, in the vacuum of space beyond Mars, the looming presence of the Krail vessels grew bolder. There were 6 main warships and several support craft. The Krail had perfected their approach after countless planetary conquests. Locate medical infrastructure, eradicate it first to crush morale, then dismantle the rest of society. Their commander, Nazar, a towering figure with scaled skin and burning red eyes, surveyed a holographic map of Earth's major hospital locations. He had little patience for negotiation. The Krail, after all, had seen many worlds cower when their healers were annihilated. This was only the beginning. Back on Earth, the cracks in global unity were already starting to mend under the threat. The newly formed Earth Defense Command scheduled an immediate briefing in Geneva, drawing representatives from every major nation. People recalled how humans had squabbled among themselves over resources, politics, and ideologies. But the vile act of attacking healers triggered an instinctual solidarity that Earth's governments had rarely mustered. Within mere hours, a broad coalition emerged that placed all military forces under a single directive: protect hospitals, rescue survivors, and identify the enemy. Mariana received a seat at the table of high-ranking officers and officials. Beside her stood General Collins, the top commander of Earth's defense, who had initially downplayed the unidentified ships. Now, he had the look of a man who realized his underestimation could have dire consequences. The hush in the briefing room was broken only by the hum of air conditioning and the shuffle of data tablets. The intelligence officer stood at the front, face grim. We have partial confirmation that the group involved in the lunar base attack is the Krail Empire. Their ships have refrained from contacting us or responding to hails. However, we have triangulated their path. It appears they're mapping out Earth's medical installations. Based on what we know of Krail tactics, they aim to strike healing centers first, sow terror, and cripple the planet's ability to treat casualties. A surge of anger, almost tangible, rolled through the room. A staff doctor, newly assigned to the Defense Council, asked in disbelief, why would they target places dedicated to saving lives? They do it on every world they conquer, the officer replied. It's a psychological blow, plus a strategic one. With no functioning medical infrastructure, planetary defense collapses quickly. Troops can't recover from injuries, civilians lose hope, and entire civilizations fall faster. Mariana clenched her fists. She had seen cruelty in her missions, but something about directly attacking hospitals disgusted her more than any savage battlefield she'd ever witnessed. She glanced at General Collins. He wore the stern face of a man about to rectify a mistake. He cleared his throat and addressed the room. Angel Corps will be our spearhead for immediate defense of these facilities. They have the training and the mindset to operate within a hospital environment under attack. Additionally, we will dispatch conventional military units to fortify major population centers. We have to assume the worst. The Krail have shown they aren't bound by any code. As if to confirm that suspicion, an urgent report flashed on the main screen. Another orbital station over Earth's southern hemisphere had gone silent, presumably attacked in the same manner as the lunar base. Panic rippled across the planet. Civilians began to recall that Earth's ascension to the Galactic Council was still recent. There were only partial guarantees of help from other civilizations, and the few that might come to Earth's aid would not arrive in time. Humanity was, for the moment, on its own. Thousands of hospital staff throughout every nation mobilized. Some had only rudimentary training in self-defense, but they prepared anyway, locking down wards, reinforcing entry points, coordinating with local military outposts. Meanwhile, the Angel Corps, a specialized force of about 5,000 globally, spread out across strategic locations. Mariana and her immediate teammates, including Sergeant Lucas Reed and Dr. Kayla Song, took a shuttle to a massive hospital complex in Minnesota called New Eden Medical Center. It was believed to be a high-priority target, given its advanced trauma facilities. Along the flight, Mariana explained to them the dire reality. Krail soldiers aren't going to show mercy. We either subdue them or they'll slaughter everyone inside. We can't rely on the normal rules of engagement. They've broken them already. Sergeant Lucas Reed gave a nod, his face calm. He was a longtime ally of Mariana, equally adept at handling firearms and bandaging wounds. Understood, Captain. We need to be ready to neutralize them swiftly. We also have to keep the doctors and patients alive. Dr. Kayla Song, a xenobiologist specialized in analyzing alien physiology, studied her data tablet. From the limited records we have, Krail biology is robust. They possess a heightened capacity for regeneration, but they have certain vulnerabilities in their nervous system that might be exploited. I'm working on a sedative that can incapacitate them quickly without lethal effect. She paused, looking up. But it's experimental. I can't guarantee it'll be 100% safe. Mariana's lips pressed into a thin line. The Angel Corps tried to avoid lethal force whenever possible. Their credo was that life was precious, even if they were forced to fight. Still, these were extraordinary circumstances. She replied, "Prepare whatever you can. The point is to stop them from carrying out a massacre. If that means we risk potential side effects, so be it. Better a risk than letting them butcher our healers." The shuttle landed on the roof of New Eden Medical Center, where local security had set up watch points. The city below was in a frenzy, sirens wailing, roads jammed with anxious civilians. Word of the Krail attacks spread like wildfire, and many in the city feared the hospital would be next. Mariana and her team stepped off into a swirl of brisk wind. A hospital administrator with worry lines etched across his face met them. "Captain Hayes, I'm so glad you're here. The staff is on edge. Some have already left out of fear. We've taken in refugees from other areas, so we're overcrowded. We have nowhere near enough guards, and none of them have faced alien warriors before." Mariana gripped the man's shoulder reassuringly. "We'll do our best to protect you, but be ready to follow orders quickly if the Krail strike." They descended into the labyrinth of hallways. Patients in wheelchairs, gurneys, or simply standing along the corridors watched them pass. Most recognized the Angel Corps insignia and found a measure of hope in that symbol. The transformation of a normal hospital into a fortress was strange and unsettling. Corridors lined with sandbags, operating rooms doubling as triage stations in case of large-scale injuries, doctors wearing sidearms over their white coats. The tension was palpable, even in the subdued hush typical of medical facilities. Hours passed with no attack. The night stretched on, adrenaline wearing thin, replaced by a dull dread of the unknown. Then, in the early dawn, the power flickered. Communication lines jammed. The outer sentries on the hospital roof signaled that unidentified craft were descending through the clouds, red holes aglow in the sunrise. Instantly, the hospital staff scrambled into the protective positions the Angel Corps had assigned. Mariana quickly radioed the local command post, but static interference was heavy. Then a mechanical roar shook the building. Through the windows, Mariana spotted the silhouette of Krail dropships touching down on the hospital's parking lots. Gunfire erupted from local defenders. The Krail responded with lethal precision, cutting down the outmatched security. Mariana gritted her teeth. This is it. Everyone to your positions. Do not let them breach the wards. She sprinted with Lucas and Kayla to the central lobby. Alarms blared throughout the facility, yet amidst the chaos, medical teams still guided patients to safer zones. The first wave of Krail troopers smashed through the main entrance. Tall, imposing figures in segmented armor strode through swirling dust. Mariana glimpsed the alien faces contorted in triumphant sneers, as though they expected no real resistance. Their first mistake. Angel Corps and hospital security fired. Kayla tested her specialized sedative ammunition. Some Krail collapsed, writhing as if struck by violent spasms. Others roared and charged. Mariana rolled behind an overturned reception desk, taking aim with a sidearm designed to penetrate the Krail's tough hides. Meanwhile, doctors who had only days ago performed surgeries under peaceful conditions now found themselves pressed into action. Amid the shrieking patients, a handful of white-coated figures stood their ground, brandishing weapons they had hoped never to use. For them, this was a battle not for territory or power, but for the lives in their charge. In the midst of the gunfire, Mariana spotted a cluster of Krail troopers firing at a sealed ward door, behind which mothers and children were sheltering. She dashed across the hallway, bullets and plasma streaking overhead, and slid behind a pillar. She fired 2 quick shots. One trooper fell with a grunt, sedative dart lodged in his neck. Another swung around. Their eyes met, and Mariana felt a jolt of raw hatred from the alien. He raised a spike blade, preparing to lunge. She managed a single shot into his leg, but he kept coming, gurgling alien curses. At the last second, Sergeant Lucas tackled him from the side, driving a stun baton into the gap in his armor. The trooper jerked and collapsed. They had no time to pause. More Krail swarmed in, guns blazing. Despite the chaos, Mariana noticed the Krail seemed perplexed, even angry, that so many healers were fighting back. Perhaps they had expected a panicked crowd of unarmed doctors. Instead, they met calm, practiced professionals who knew precisely which arteries to sever, which joints to disable, and which chemicals caused immediate incapacitation. The very knowledge these doctors used to mend injuries now served them in combat. Eventually, the Krail in the main lobby were pushed back, either unconscious or retreating. The echo of gunfire persisted in distant corridors. Mariana regrouped with Kayla and Lucas. Kayla's face was streaked with sweat and dust. "It's working," she said, gesturing at her sedative launcher. "But it's not consistent. Some Krail are only partially affected." Lucas scanned for injuries among their group. "At least we've forced them to slow down. They weren't expecting this kind of resistance." Mariana pointed toward the upper floors. "We have to protect the ICU wards. If they sabotage critical care units, the hospital's capacity is crippled. Let's move." They raced upstairs, finding pockets of fierce close-quarter combat. Terrified staff and patients huddled behind any cover they could find. Several Krail had smashed through the hospital's mechanical shutters. One tried to tear the oxygen lines from the ceiling. Mariana shot him in the shoulder with her sidearm, and a hospital nurse rushed in from behind to jam a syringe of powerful sedative into his neck. The Krail's eyes rolled back, and he crumpled to the floor. The nurse, trembling, looked at Mariana and said softly, "My job is to administer medicine, but I never thought it would be in this context." When the last wave of Krail in that corridor was subdued, the hospital staff began to re-establish life-saving services almost immediately. Alarms still shrieked, bodies lay strewn across the tile floor, and the acrid smell of scorched material hung in the air. Yet among the carnage, the doctors and nurses placed the wounded, enemy and ally alike, onto stretchers. For lines were inserted, pulses were checked. The Angel Corps sealed off corridors to contain any further infiltrations. As the swirling dust settled, it was clear. The Krail's attempt to quickly overrun New Eden Medical Center had failed. Similar reports began pouring in from other major hospitals around the globe. The Krail had launched coordinated strikes, but the Angel Corps and allied defenders fought them off with minimal casualties. The broadcast news channels showed footage of white-coated doctors returning fire, medics in body armor dragging wounded soldiers out of crossfire, and alien troops captured or sedated. Earth realized, in that moment, that the usual methods of warfare had turned upside down. The Krail had expected an easy psychological victory by targeting the heart of Earth's healthcare system. Instead, they triggered exactly the opposite effect: a deep, unified wrath from those sworn to protect life. Back aboard the Krail flagship, Commander Nazar seethed at the constant stream of bad news from the surface. He had personally led dozens of planetary subjugations before. In each case, smashing the healers first crippled morale so thoroughly that local defenders collapsed soon after. This time, his warriors spoke of armed medics and combat surgeons who knew exactly where to strike. They reported horrifying details about humans using specialized chemical darts that disrupted Krail physiology, sedation bombs that rendered entire squads unconscious without a single lethal shot. Some troopers feared being left alive in a half-paralyzed state, at the mercy of the very medics they had tried to kill. Nazar swept an armored fist across the command console in fury, sending a spray of sparks. "Impossible," he roared to his subordinates. "No civilization combines warfare and medicine to such an extent. They must be assisted by advanced off-worlders." One of his sub-lieutenants, limping from a wound inflicted on Earth, bowed his head in shame. "Commander, the humans appear to possess this dual capacity on their own. Our intelligence was flawed." Nazar slammed his fist down again. "We have no choice but to retaliate more severely. If their doctors are also fighters, then we will show them no mercy. Prepare the second wave." This time, the Krail sent a large portion of their fleet to orbit, planning simultaneous assaults on at least 50 sites. But Earth was ready, anticipating the pattern. The Angel Corps spread out, supported by newly reconfigured defensive systems that recognize Krail transponder signals. Even more crucially, Dr. Kayla Song's team refined their sedative formula after analyzing the physiology of captive Krail troopers, thereby boosting the compound's effectiveness. Earth's modest array of starfighters took off from hidden bases, aiming to force the Krail warships into the atmosphere where they would be more vulnerable. Meanwhile, the real fight would happen again on the ground. Hospital complexes bracing for another storm of alien hostility. Within hours, battles erupted across multiple continents. The Krail hammered local defenses with powerful weapons, but each time they tried to push into medical facilities, they encountered the dreaded Angel Corps. Some found themselves caught in trap hallways rigged with gaseous sedatives that targeted their unique respiratory systems. Others were blindsided by squads of combat medics who, unlike typical soldiers, aimed for joints and nerve clusters that their medical knowledge had identified as key vulnerabilities. The fighting was furious, yet in many cases it ended quickly. The Krail discovered, to their shock, that not only were Earth's medics armed, but they also insisted on giving first aid to fallen Krail once the fight was over. This twisted the Krail's sense of warfare. Who fights to the point of subduing the enemy, then revives them? Earth's leadership soon recognized that the strategy was working. By preserving Krail prisoners rather than killing them, they gleaned more intelligence. One prisoner, badly injured, ended up in a makeshift ICU ward under Dr. Kayla's care. As she treated him, she realized his body was regenerating at an accelerated pace. Once conscious, the alien stared at her in stunned silence. Through a translator device, she told him, "You probably hate that I'm saving your life, but I won't let you die on my operating table." He hissed, "My commander will kill you all." Her face was filled with a calm resolve. Your commander doesn't understand who he's dealing with. Earth's doctors save lives, but we also know precisely how to end them if forced. Such was the paradox that confounded every Krail trooper. They had grown up believing in a strict dichotomy. Healers never fought, warriors never healed. On Earth, the lines blurred. The more Krail squads had arrived, the more they found themselves subdued by a synergy of medical science and tactical prowess that defied their understanding of warfare. Their normal advantage, destroying a civilization by first shattering its healthcare capacity, was gone. In a final, desperate bid, Nazar ordered his flagship to a low orbit near Mars. He hoped to draw out Earth's defenses and crush them once and for all. He had done the same on many worlds. Once he cornered the local military, he flattened them. But Earth's response was equally clever. They launched a fleet of what appeared to be hospital ships, each adorned with bright red crosses and universal medical symbols. According to standard galactic treaties, these ships were not to be attacked. But Nazar's entire campaign revolved around breaking those rules. As soon as the hospital ships entered orbit, he prepared to open fire on them anyway. It was then he discovered that his own targeting systems registered those ships as protected. The software that recognized medical transponder codes was written into his empire's broader navigation protocols, part an older treaty Krail had cynically signed to avoid condemnation in earlier conquests. Disabling that software took time, which his engineers began at once. The moment Nazar's flagship hesitated, small vessels detached from the hospital ships and rocketed forward. They were disguised medical transport craft, but each carried squads of Angel Corps. They latched onto the flagship's docking ports, plasma torches slicing through hull plating. Before Nazar realized the danger, Earth's medics were inside. The Krail defenders responded with brutal close-quarters resistance, but the Angel Corps pressed forward. They deployed special grenades laced with Kayla's tailored sedative. Entire corridors filled with a faint, sweet-smelling mist that dropped Krail troops unconscious in seconds. Sergeant Lucas Reed led one squad that overcame the flagship's security center. With a burst of gunfire, he neutralized the last guard at the console. Then his team jammed the Krail communications, cutting off Nazar's pleas for reinforcements. Meanwhile, Mariana's squad fought step by step toward the command deck. She kicked open a sealed hatch, only to be met by a barrage of plasma bolts. Diving behind a bulkhead, she signaled her team to throw sedation grenades. The hiss of released gas followed, and the Krail gunfire faded into panicked coughs. Pushing through the swirling fumes, Mariana found herself face to face with Commander Nazar. He was tall, imposing, and his eyes glowed with unconcealed rage. In one of his clawed hands, he clutched a short, vicious-looking blade. Mariana aimed her firearm at him, breathing rapidly. They locked gazes. "You dare invade my ship," Nazar growled, under the guise of medical rescue. "Your empire killed doctors on the moon, attacked hospitals on Earth," Mariana replied, her voice steady. "We came to stop you." He scoffed, sweeping the blade in an arc, forcing her to step back. "You contradict yourselves. Healers do not fight. You disgrace the notion of medicine." Mariana's mouth tightened. "You don't understand humanity. We heal because we value life, but we fight because we must protect it. You attacked our healers first. Now we are your reckoning." Nazar lunged, striking with surprising speed despite the sedation gas that must have seeped into his lungs. Mariana twisted aside, feeling the blade scrape across her shoulder, pain flaring. She fired a shot. It tore through the commander's armor, drawing a roar from him. Stumbling, he still tried to raise his weapon. In the corner of her eye, she saw Dr. Kayla Song appear in the doorway, a handheld injector in her grip. Kayla jammed it into Nazar's exposed neck, releasing a potent dose that targeted Krail neuroreceptors. Nazar snarled, dropping to one knee. He tried to speak, but only garbled words spilled out. A moment later, he collapsed onto the floor. It was over. As the sedation grenades took effect throughout the ship, Krail warriors slumped wherever they stood. Mariana slid down against a bulkhead, wincing at her bloody shoulder. Kayla rushed to treat her, applying a coagulant and pain relief injection. The final corridors were secured by Lucas's team, who confirmed that the flagship was effectively under Earth's control. For the first time in known history, the dreaded Krail had failed to subjugate their target. They had lost to an enemy that fought not with overwhelming force, but with precise, medically informed tactics, and with a sense of moral outrage that fueled their unwavering defense of healers. Over the course of the next few days, Earth's forces mopped up the remaining pockets of Krail resistance, scattered across orbital stations and partially damaged hospitals. While there had been casualties on both sides, the toll was far lighter than expected for an alien invasion. Many Krail troopers ended up in Earth medical wards, receiving care from the very doctors they had tried to massacre. This contradictory mercy baffled them. Some spat in defiance. Others stared quietly at the men and women in white coats who refused to let them die. Earth's broadcast networks showed images of sedation bombs, medically specialized bullets, the heroic acts of hospital staff under fire, and ultimately, the swift neutralization of Krail squads. The planet's population responded with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Yes, lives had been lost, but it could have been much worse. The Krail had been driven off or captured by an alliance of doctors, nurses, medics, and specialized soldiers who wore the caduceus as both shield and sword. Officials from the Galactic Council rushed to intervene. Many other species, both fearful and astonished, demanded explanation. Word spread quickly that Earth's hospital ships had boarded the Krail flagship under medical transponder codes, effectively tricking the Krail's own targeting software. The Krail representative on the council complained bitterly about Earth violating the sanctity of medical neutrality. The human ambassador retorted with undeniable evidence of Krail butchery at the lunar base, stating that Krail had invalidated any such protections by attacking Earth's healers first. The council deliberated. Scenes of half-destroyed hospitals, battered but functional under the watchful eyes of armed medics, left a profound impression. Commander Nazar, now a prisoner, was taken to a secure facility in Geneva, ironically a city famous for humanitarian conventions. He remained mostly silent, except for occasional snarled threats about the Krail Empire returning with greater force. In response, Earth's delegation calmly presented their research on Krail physiology, which they threatened to release galaxy-wide if the Empire attempted another invasion. Such data, in the hands of other advanced civilizations, could produce targeted weapons to devastate the Krail. The Empire suddenly found itself in a precarious position, caught violating a fundamental taboo, having lost a flagship, and risking a wave of new enemies armed with knowledge of their biological weaknesses. Meanwhile, many captured Krail soldiers were questioned and then offered medical treatment to fix lingering injuries. Some responded with confusion or grudging respect. Others remained hostile, calling humans abominations for blending the role of doctor and warrior. However, a new precedent had been set, and it reverberated through galactic politics. If you attack Earth's healers, you face the entire force of a species that has no qualms about defending medicine with medical knowledge. The name Angel Corps became legendary almost overnight. In a massive hearing before the Galactic Council, Earth was both praised and criticized. Delegates from pacifist races condemned the duplicity of using medical transponder codes to mount an assault, even if it was done to protect innocents. The more militaristic species applauded Earth for turning the Krail strategy back on them. Ultimately, the Council recognized the extraordinary circumstances. The final resolution demanded that the Krail Empire cease all hostilities, pay restitution, and that Earth share certain medical treatments for injured Krail once all aggression halted. Earth complied, asserting that they would never refuse medical help, even to enemies, as long as those enemies respected the line they had so callously crossed. A week after the fiasco, Captain Mariana Hayes limped through a recovery ward in Geneva. She had a bandaged shoulder, but insisted on checking on her team. Sergeant Lucas Reed had only minor injuries, a few bruises from hand-to-hand scuffles. Dr. Kayla Song was exhausted from endless lab work, but otherwise unhurt. They sat together on a bench beside a row of windows overlooking a serene lake. From behind them, a news broadcast repeated the extraordinary tale of Earth's victory against the Krail. Mariana turned the volume down, preferring the hush of the real world for a moment. Lucas rubbed the back of his neck. Hard to believe how fast it all happened. Less than a week from the first lunar attack to the final confrontation on Nazar's flagship. Kayla nodded. We rewrote the rules of engagement in those days. They never expected healers with that level of combat readiness. Mariana gazed out the window. We do everything we can to preserve life. But if someone tries to destroy our capacity to heal, then we strike back with the knowledge we possess. That's our oath turned into a shield. Irene Pearson, freshly flown in from London to assist in Geneva's overwhelmed wards, approached with a faint smile. Seems the Council is going to label Earth as a protected medical resource zone. That means we'll have official backing if any other empire tries to replicate what the Krail did. Who knows? Maybe this war will push the galaxy to strengthen rules about safeguarding doctors. Mariana closed her eyes. The pain in her shoulder was a dull ache, overshadowed by the flood of memories. The frantic battles in hospital corridors, the stench of burned antiseptic, the sight of an alien commander dropping under a sedative injection. I hope it does, she murmured. No more civilizations should lose their healers like that. Yet she knew the galaxy was vast, and some powers would never respect the line between combatant and non-combatant. The best they could do was stay vigilant. The next time, Earth would be even better prepared, having turned the unthinkable scenario of attacking medics into the ultimate trap for would-be invaders. Eventually, General Collins arrived at the ward, nodding gravely at Mariana. I just got out of a high-level meeting, he said. The Krail leadership is capitulating for now. Their official statement is that they underestimated us and that they will abide by new terms. We'll see if that holds, but for the moment, Earth is safe. Lucas asked quietly, and what about Nazar? The general exhaled. He's facing a tribunal. Our doctors have tended to his wounds. If he had it his way, he'd probably prefer we'd killed him in battle. Instead, he gets to face judgment. Mariana stood, wincing at the pull of stitches. We are indeed a paradox to him. We patch him up while condemning him for attacking our healers. Let that be the lesson to the galaxy. She walked past the general, heading toward the corridor that led to the long-term care wing. Each step reminded her of the complexities of being both a medic and a soldier. The pain in her shoulder pulsed in time with her heartbeat, but she found an odd comfort in it. It was proof of the oath she had lived by, an oath to preserve life, even as she confronted a brutal foe. She recalled the phrase many veterans in the Angel Corps repeated, "We fight because we are healers, and because we know exactly what's at stake if we fail." Outside, the sunlight spilled across the city, reflecting off the lake with a brilliance that seemed to fill every corner of the horizon. Those scars from the conflict remained, ruined wards, grieving families. There was a renewed sense of unity that stretched across Earth. For once, the planet stood with a single purpose. If an enemy dared to strike the guardians of life itself, that enemy would face not just an army, but an entire species determined to defend their healers at any cost. Months later, when the matter finally came to a head in the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council, humans stood side by side with delegations from across known space. The Krail, now humiliated and wary, listened to testimonies from doctors, patients, and medics who had survived the invasion. They listened as advanced species remarked on Earth's baffling approach. turning hospital ships into Trojan horses, using sedation bombs instead of lethal weapons, capturing instead of slaughtering. Some revered it as an evolution in warfare, others denounced it as a twisted exploitation of medical neutrality. But Earth's ambassador concluded with a simple statement: "We did not break the spirit of medical neutrality. We upheld it, for we do not kill those we defeat. We heal them, even if they once threatened our healers." That, at last, sealed the argument. Earth's approach might have bent certain technicalities, but they had done so in defense of a principle that the entire council revered: the sanctity of medical care. Over time, the story grew into a sort of legend. Whispers among younger species told of a planet called Earth, where the doctors walked into battle carrying both bandages and bullets, syringes and sidearms. Some called them monstrous for merging healing and combat. Others called them angels of death, for they knew precisely how to strike mortal blows. But on Earth, they simply called themselves medics, men and women who refused to let anyone turn hospitals into slaughterhouses. By the time Mariana fully recovered, Earth had begun reshaping its entire defensive strategy around the Angel Core model. Training programs launched worldwide, teaching medical personnel advanced self-defense. Former soldiers learned triage and specialized treatments. The line between healers and warriors blurred further, but most embraced it as a necessity in a dangerous galaxy. The list of Earth's medical code was updated to reflect new realities. Yes, first do no harm. However, if forced into conflict, they would do what was necessary to safeguard patients. That vow, which once was purely moral, now had strategic weight. The final scene was quiet. Mariana returned to London to see Irene in the same hospital hallway where their conversation had first been interrupted by the emergency broadcast. The reconstruction teams had already repaired the minor structural damage from the Krail infiltration. Her footsteps echoed against gleaming tile. Patients and staff bustled as usual, the delicate hum of everyday healing at work. Irene, noticing Mariana's reflection in the glass partition, approached with a warm smile. "We made it," she said simply. Mariana nodded. "I almost can't believe it. But we did." They looked out the window together at the scattered lights of the city. Tomorrow, more patients would arrive, more surgeries would be performed, more people will be saved. And if, in the future, another threat arrived, the same doctors, nurses, and medics would stand ready to protect them. Because Earth had learned a vital lesson. Those who best understood how to preserve life also understood precisely how fragile it was and how to defend it when all else failed. Such was the new legacy of humankind across the galaxy. The Krail had come to break their spirit by assaulting the core of their compassion, the very hands that healed the sick and wounded. They had expected a swift and merciless triumph. Instead, they encountered an alliance of professionals wielding scalpels and rifles with equal expertise. The cost of that mistake was the abrupt end to their ambitions of easy conquest. And so the name of Earth would be forever intertwined with a warning repeated by travelers in distant corners of the cosmos. First, they attacked our healers. Now, they meet the angels of death.